Retired Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reed sat in his usual corner booth at Sal's Diner in Oceanside, California, positioned exactly where he'd sat every Sunday morning for the past 18 months. The location wasn't coincidental. It was tactical necessity, hardwired into neural pathways that 20 years as a Navy SEAL had made permanent. From this specific booth, Marcus could monitor all entry points, including the front door and kitchen access, track movement through the entire dining space, observe the emergency exit near the restrooms, and most critically, keep his back solidly against the wall where no threat could approach from behind. The habits forged during 2 decades of operational service didn't fade with retirement paperwork, medical discharge documentation, or the well-intentioned advice from VA therapists who suggested he learn to relax in civilian environments. Those instincts embedded themselves in fundamental brain architecture that remained active regardless of how many months passed since his last mission. At 42, Marcus looked distinguished rather than damaged, silver threading tastefully through dark hair at the temples, weather-worn lines around his eyes from years squinting against sun in hostile territories across 4 continents, the kind of mature appearance that suggested hard-earned experience rather than simple aging. But his body told a more complicated story to anyone trained to read the signs. He moved with careful deliberation, favoring his left side where surgically stabilized vertebra L4 reminded him with every shift in position that his operational career had ended not in combat glory but in mundane training accident. The accident had occurred during what should have been routine instructor duties, a fast rope insertion training exercise at Naval Special Warfare Training Command. Equipment failure, a catastrophic rope anchor malfunction, a 20-foot fall onto concrete that should have been padded according to safety protocols but wasn't due to maintenance oversight and budget constraints. The impact crushed Marcus's L4 vertebra, damaged surrounding discs, created chronic pain that no amount of physical therapy, surgical intervention, or pharmaceutical management could completely eliminate. The Navy's Medical Evaluation Board had been clinical and final in their assessment. Spinal damage incompatible with operational requirements for special warfare personnel. Medical retirement with full benefits and pension. Honorable discharge with commendations acknowledging 20 years of exemplary service. But the doctor's exact words haunted Marcus more than any combat memory. You can live a full civilian life with appropriate pain management strategies. What you absolutely cannot do is fast rope from helicopters, conduct halo parachute insertions, carry 80-pound ruck loads through hostile terrain, or maintain the physical readiness standards required for SEAL operations. Now, Marcus worked as a security consultant, analyzing threat assessments for corporate clients, designing protective protocols for executives traveling to hostile environments, conducting vulnerability audits for facilities concerned about terrorism or workplace violence, work that engaged his tactical mind and utilized his decades of experience reading threats and planning defensive operations. But it left his body restless, his combat-trained physiology yearning for the operational tempo and physical intensity that defined SEAL culture. He lived alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment 3 miles from Naval Base Coronado, fought chronic pain with disciplined refusal to develop pharmaceutical dependence beyond over-the-counter anti-inflammatories, maintained rigorous physical therapy routines that kept his damaged spine functional, and struggled daily with the fundamental identity question that haunted every medically retired operator. Who was he when he couldn't be who he'd been for 20 years? Beside his booth, lying on a custom orthopedic mat that Marcus had researched and purchased specifically for these Sunday breakfast routines, was Kane, a 9-year-old German Shepherd and Marcus's former K9 partner from 4 deployments spanning Iraq and Afghanistan. Kane had retired alongside Marcus, not by choice, but by medical necessity resulting from that same training accident. German Shepherds were the backbone of military working dog programs, prized for their exceptional combination of intelligence, loyalty, courage, strength, speed, endurance, and adaptability to almost any climatic condition. Kane had completed the intensive 120-day training program at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, qualifying as a dual-purpose military working dog trained for both patrol work and explosive detection. During 4 combat deployments, Kane had detected threats that saved Marcus's life and the lives of countless other operators dozens of times. IEDs buried beneath Afghan dirt, ambush positions concealed in Iraqi marketplace rubble, vehicle-borne explosive devices positioned along convoy routes, weapons caches hidden in civilian structures. German Shepherds' heightened senses, particularly their keen sense of smell and acute hearing, provided detection capabilities that enhanced mission success and gave commanders both physical and psychological advantages in hostile environments. When Marcus had fallen during that training accident, Kane had been positioned at the training area's secured perimeter, waiting for his handler to complete the instructor demonstration. The rope anchor's catastrophic failure had sent Marcus crashing down with horrifying speed, but it had also whipped the loose rope end violently across the training area. The heavy metal carabiner attached to the rope's end, weighing approximately 2 pounds and traveling at lethal velocity, had struck Kane's right front leg with enough concentrated force to shatter the radius bone. Kane's veterinary evaluation had been similarly clinical and final. Healed fracture leaving permanent structural weakness, chronic arthritis developing at fracture site, mobility permanently compromised by biomechanical changes affecting gait and balance. The dog could walk, could function adequately in civilian life with appropriate pain management and reduced physical demands. But he absolutely could not perform the explosive sprints through rough terrain, long-distance endurance running, or combat deployment demands required of military working dogs serving in special operations units. Medical retirement, honorable discharge from military service, adoption by handler under provisions of the National Defense Authorization Act that prioritized military working dog placement with their handlers. They were both medically discharged warriors, human and canine, trying to find purpose and meaning in a world that moved too slow, felt too safe, lacked the operational tempo and mission focus that had defined their identities for years. Kane's dark, intelligent eyes constantly scanned the diner with the same tactical awareness his handler maintained. Professional vigilance honed through years of training and combat deployment that never completely powered down even 18 months into retirement. At precisely 09:20 hours, Marcus still thought exclusively in military time despite civilian transition. The diner's atmosphere shifted in ways most civilians wouldn't detect, but that immediately set off every alarm system Marcus's 2 decades of training had installed in his threat assessment protocols. He noticed it immediately, reading micro-expressions and body language patterns the way other people read newspaper headlines or social media feeds. 3 booths away sat Eleanor Briggs, a 68-year-old woman Marcus recognized as a Sunday breakfast regular who typically arrived around 30 hours and ordered the same meal: scrambled eggs, wheat toast dry, black coffee. Today her breakfast sat completely untouched, going cold while she stared at her phone with visible anxiety radiating from every aspect of her posture and expression. Her hands trembled slightly, involuntary motor response indicating elevated stress hormones. Her breathing was elevated and shallow. Marcus could read it in the rapid rise and fall of her shoulders. Classic fear response, unmistakable to anyone with training in threat assessment and behavioral analysis. Across from Eleanor sat a younger man in civilian clothes, jeans, button-down shirt, casual jacket. But Marcus's operator identification system tagged him immediately as law enforcement despite the lack of uniform or visible badge. The bearing was distinctive and impossible to fake. The way he sat with casual alertness rather than relaxed inattention. The subtle bulk under his left arm suggesting concealed carry holster. The scanning pattern that periodically checked exits and evaluated potential threats with professional discipline. Later investigation would identify him as Officer Jake Hendricks, 34 years old, Oceanside Police Department Patrol Division, currently off duty but maintaining the professional awareness that good law enforcement officers never completely turned off, even during personal time. What made Marcus's threat radar activate to full operational status was the third person who entered Sal's diner at precisely 9:21 hours. A man in his late 30s, powerfully built with approximately 6'2" height and 225 pounds of functional muscle, moving with the aggressive confidence characteristic of someone accustomed to physical dominance and certain that his size and strength made him effectively untouchable. Marcus clocked him with the instantaneous threat assessment that Navy SEALs learned through thousands of hours of practical experience identifying enemy combatants operating within civilian populations. Tattoos visible on forearms and neck, mixed martial arts gym affiliations, combat sport imagery suggesting serious training background rather than casual fitness interest. Movement patterns indicating excellent proprioception, balance, and kinesthetic awareness characteristic of trained fighters. Predatory scanning of the room that locked onto Eleanor's booth with focused intensity that suggested specific targeting rather than random selection. This man, later identified as Victor Crane, 37 years old, training at an elite MMA gym with a record of 17 amateur fight victories and reputation for aggressive fighting style, approached Eleanor's booth and began speaking in low, threatening tones that Marcus couldn't hear from his position 20 feet away, but could read through body language that telegraphed intimidation, menace, and deliberate psychological domination. Crane was leaning over the booth, deliberately invading Eleanor's personal space, using his considerable physical size as psychological weapon to create fear and compliance. Eleanor shrank back visibly, terror transforming her features as Crane continued speaking words that Marcus's partial lip-reading skills suggested included explicit threats. Officer Hendricks stood from the booth, his movement controlled but firm, left hand moving to display his badge, while his right hand remained positioned near his concealed weapon, speaking words that Marcus's lip-reading partially captured. "Step back. Police officer, need you to comply." That's when everything escalated from tense confrontation to active violence, requiring immediate tactical response. Victor Crane, who had been stalking Eleanor Briggs for 3 weeks after she'd witnessed him brutally assaulting a woman in a shopping center parking lot and had the audacity to call 911 and provide testimony leading to his arrest on assault charges, made a calculated decision in that moment that an off-duty police officer wearing civilian clothes didn't represent real authority, worthy of respect or compliance. His mixed martial arts ego and history of using violence successfully to control situations and intimidate witnesses convinced him that civilian clothes meant vulnerability, that displaying a badge without uniform backing meant weakness, that he could neutralize this threat and complete his intended mission of teaching Eleanor Briggs never to interfere with his business again. Crane attacked Officer Hendricks with brutal efficiency that demonstrated his extensive combat sports training. A sucker punch delivered with full hip rotation and torque transfer, targeting the officer's temple with precision designed to cause immediate loss of consciousness. The strike landed perfectly. Hendricks dropped like a machine, switched off mid-operation, consciousness gone before his body hit the diner's tile floor with sickening impact. Crane followed him down with ground and pound techniques straight from cage fighting methodology, achieved mounted position within 2 seconds, began delivering hammer fists targeting the head and face, systematic violence clearly designed to cause maximum damage and ensure the officer couldn't recover and threaten him again. Eleanor screamed, high-pitched terror that cut through the Sunday morning breakfast ambiance. Other diners froze in that peculiar paralysis that grips civilians confronted with sudden violence in supposedly safe environments. Most people simply don't have neural pathways for processing combat aggression in pancake and coffee contexts. Crane positioned himself between Marcus's booth and the diner's exit, effectively blocking both Eleanor and the unconscious, bleeding officer from escape routes. Perfect tactical positioning from Crane's perspective. Control the space, dominate the threats, complete the mission. Kane's body went instantly rigid. The alert posture Marcus knew from hundreds of mission scenarios across 4 combat deployments. The dog's military working dog training recognized a threat actively engaging in violence against protected persons. Every muscle in Kane's 70-pound frame tensed despite the injured leg, preparing for potential engagement. Marcus's tactical assessment took approximately 3 seconds, the kind of compressed decision-making that SEALs trained through endless scenario repetitions until analysis became pure instinct. Crane outweighed Marcus by at least 40 pounds of functional muscle. Crane demonstrated active combat sports training, suggesting current conditioning and technical proficiency. Crane was currently demonstrating clear intent and proven capability to cause serious bodily harm or death. Officer Hendricks was unconscious and bleeding from facial lacerations. Eleanor was trapped in the booth with no escape route. Civilian intervention could end catastrophically if not executed with overwhelming tactical superiority. But Marcus wasn't just any civilian, and Kane wasn't just any dog. Marcus gave a single hand signal, barely visible, just 2 fingers tapped against his thigh in a pattern that Kane had learned during 120 days of intensive training at Lackland Air Force Base and refined through 4 combat deployments spanning 7 years. The signal's meaning was precise: assess threat level and prepare for potential engagement authorization. Kane understood immediately, with the instantaneous comprehension that characterized German Shepherd's exceptional intelligence and trainability. The dog shifted his weight despite the injured leg that caused chronic pain, redistributing load to compensate for structural weakness, every muscle coiling for explosive action if handler authorization came. Marcus stood slowly from the booth, moving with economical grace that came from decades of close-quarters combat training. The slight limp from his crushed vertebra was visible to observant eyes, but his hands hung relaxed at his sides. His breathing remained controlled and steady, and his voice, when he finally spoke, cut through the chaos with calm authority that demanded immediate attention. Step away from them. Now. Crane looked up from the unconscious officer, Hendrix's blood staining his knuckles, and sized up Marcus with the dismissive assessment characteristic of someone who'd spent years using physical intimidation successfully against civilians who lacked training or capability to resist. What Crane saw was a middle-aged man with gray at the temples, moving with a noticeable limp that favored one side, hesitating just outside optimal striking range in what Crane interpreted as fear or uncertainty. Fatal mistake born from ego and incomplete threat assessment. Crane sneered with confidence, radiating from every aspect of his posture and expression. "This doesn't concern you, old man. Sit your crippled ass down before you get hurt worse than your cop friend here." He gestured dismissively toward Marcus, then deliberately turned back to Eleanor, reaching with clear intent to physically grab her arm and remove her from the booth. That's when Kane moved with the explosive speed that characterized German Shepherds' exceptional athleticism and made them ideal for military combat operations. The dog's limp disappeared completely under operational adrenaline that overrode chronic pain through neurochemical processes honed by years of training and deployment experience. Kane interposed himself between Crane and Eleanor with professional precision, not attacking yet, but denying access with a low growl that vibrated with controlled aggression. It was a sound that communicated unambiguous message. Attempt to proceed and discover what a military-trained K9 with 4 combat deployments can do. Crane, accustomed to intimidating people, but completely inexperienced with combat-trained military working dogs, made his second fatal tactical mistake. He reached toward Kane to move the mutt out of his path. Marcus gave another signal, verbal this time, a single word in Arabic that had been Kane's operational language throughout 7 years of deployment. Hafiz, protect. The command was deliberate choice, operational security protocol that prevented enemy combatants from issuing counter-commands to military working dogs. Kane erupted into controlled professional aggression, taking Crane's extended arm in a bite calculated for pain compliance and threat neutralization rather than maximum tissue damage. German Shepherd's bite force averaged 238 pounds per square inch, powerful enough to immobilize threats, but controlled enough to avoid causing unnecessary permanent damage when properly trained. Crane screamed, instinct making him swing his free hand toward the dog attached to his arm. That's precisely when Marcus engaged with 20 years of SEAL close-quarters combat training. What happened next was described by multiple witnesses during subsequent investigation interviews as clinical, terrifyingly efficient, and like watching a professional dismantling an amateur. Marcus used Crane's compromised balance and pain distraction to execute a flawless joint lock technique, rotating the fighter's shoulder past its natural range of motion, not far enough to cause dislocation, but sufficient to create compliance through pain, and forcing him face down on the diner floor with controlled force. Kane released on command immediately, stepped back with professional discipline, but maintained guard position over Eleanor that denied any potential threat access. The entire engagement, from initial contact to complete threat neutralization, lasted exactly 11 seconds, according to the diner's security camera footage that would later be analyzed frame by frame by law enforcement, military training commands, and self-defense instructors. Victor Crane, a man who'd won 17 amateur MMA fights through aggression and technical proficiency, who trained daily at an elite gym under professional coaching, who'd successfully intimidated dozens of people through physical dominance, was completely immobilized by a limping old man with a bad back and his crippled dog. Marcus maintained the hold with one knee positioned on Crane's spine, applying pressure that ensured compliance without causing permanent spinal damage, his free hand already performing first aid assessment on Officer Hendricks' injuries, and spoke in that same calm, authoritative voice. "Stop resisting. Police are en route. You attacked a peace officer and threatened a civilian. Every person in this establishment is a witness. Your tactical options just ran out completely." On-duty officers arrived within 4 minutes. Hendricks had managed to trigger his concealed panic button before losing consciousness, standard protocol for off-duty officers in public spaces. They found a scene that would become legendary in local law enforcement circles within hours. A retired SEAL holding an aggressive criminal in perfect restraint control. A military K-9 standing protective guard over an elderly witness, and an unconscious officer receiving competent first aid from Marcus's free hand. The diner's security footage, later released to media and viewed over 12 million times online, showed the entire sequence with perfect clarity. Crane's unprovoked attack on Officer Hendricks, Kane's professional intervention, Marcus's textbook threat neutralization executed with minimal necessary force. Officer Jake Hendricks recovered after emergency treatment for concussion protocol, fractured orbital bone requiring surgical repair, and facial lacerations requiring 18 stitches. He was placed on medical leave for 6 weeks, but attended Victor Crane's arraignment to provide victim testimony and witness statement. Victor Crane faced comprehensive criminal charges: assault on a peace officer, felony; attempted kidnapping, felony; stalking, felony; witness intimidation, felony; violation of bail conditions from his original assault case, separate felony; and battery, misdemeanor. His bail was immediately revoked. Facing overwhelming evidence, including security footage, multiple witness testimonies, and his own prior criminal history, Crane accepted a plea deal to avoid trial, where Marcus and Kane's intervention would be presented as proof of his deadly intent. He received a 7-year prison sentence with no possibility of parole before serving minimum 5 years. The investigation revealed the full context of Crane's motivation and planning. 3 weeks earlier, Eleanor Briggs had been shopping at a local shopping center when she witnessed Crane beating his girlfriend in the parking lot, punching her repeatedly while she tried to escape to her vehicle. Eleanor had immediately called 911, provided detailed witness statement, and agreed to testify. Her testimony led directly to Crane's arrest on felony assault charges. Released on bail and furious about the interference from someone who should have minded her own business, Crane had stalked Eleanor to learn her routines, discovered her Sunday breakfast pattern at Sal's Diner, and decided to teach her a lesson about testifying against him. When he discovered that Officer Hendricks, who happened to be Eleanor's nephew and often joined her for breakfast, was present, Crane saw opportunity to demonstrate that even police protection couldn't save witnesses who crossed him. His martial arts ego and history of successful violence convinced him that his training made him functionally untouchable by civilians or off-duty law enforcement. He didn't account for a Navy SEAL and a combat-deployed military working dog sitting 3 booths away, both carrying decades of experience that made Crane's aggression look like amateur hour. The Oceanside Police Department issued formal commendation to both Marcus and Kane, with Chief Rodriguez stating during the public ceremony, "A retired SEAL and his canine partner demonstrated exactly what protect and serve means in its purest form. They assessed a threat using professional training, intervened with appropriate and proportional force, and neutralized a dangerous individual without excessive violence or collateral damage." This represents the textbook definition of responsible civilian force application and exemplifies the values we want our community to understand about proper use of force. But what resonated far beyond the immediate criminal case was what happened next in the months following the incident. Marcus received contact from 23 different veterans within the first 2 weeks after the security footage went viral. SEALs, Army Rangers, Force Recon Marines, Special Forces operators, all asking about canine adoption procedures and training methodologies for personal protection dogs. Every one of them was medically retired, dealing with PTSD or permanent physical injuries, and looking for the same partnership and purpose that Marcus and Kane clearly demonstrated. Marcus realized there was a profound need that traditional veteran support systems weren't adequately addressing. Medically retired warriors needed missions, needed purpose, needed the same operational focus and protective responsibility that had defined their identities during service. 6 months after the Dyna incident, Marcus launched Ready K9 Program, a non-profit organization with 501c3 status dedicated to connecting medically retired military working dogs with medically retired veterans. The program provided comprehensive training in tactical awareness, public protection scenarios, threat assessment protocols, and responsible force application based on SEAL operational procedures adapted for civilian contexts. Kane became the program's primary demonstration dog, teaching both incoming dogs and their new veteran handlers that retirement from active military service didn't mean the mission ended. It just evolved into different form with new protected populations. Eleanor Briggs became an unexpected but powerful advocate for the program, speaking at fundraising events about how 2 warriors who were officially declared too broken to serve anymore proved definitively that purpose doesn't retire when bodies break. It just finds new people to protect and new ways to serve. She formed genuine friendship with Marcus and Kane, joining them for Sunday breakfast every week at Sal's Diner in the same booth where Crane had attacked. The location became a reminder. Violence can happen anywhere, but protection also emerges when the right people maintain readiness to intervene. 1 year after the incident, Officer Hendricks, fully recovered from his injuries and returned to active duty, approached Marcus about developing training certification protocols for police K9 units. "You neutralized an active threat in 11 seconds using techniques that I need to learn," Hendricks stated bluntly. "You did what I couldn't do, and you did it with a back injury and a limping dog. Teach me and my colleagues what you know." Marcus developed a comprehensive civilian-military K9 integration course, teaching police handlers advanced techniques from SEAL special operations about reading pre-violence indicators, managing controlled aggression in K9 partners, applying minimal necessary force for threat neutralization and de-escalating situations before violence became necessary. The diner security footage, viewed over 12 million times across multiple platforms, became official teaching tool for self-defense instructors, law enforcement training academies, and veterans organizations nationwide. It demonstrated irrefutable principle. Age, injury, and retirement don't eliminate operational capability. They just require different tactical application suited to changed physical circumstances. Marcus and Kane, both moving slower now at 43 and 10 years old respectively, both carrying visible and invisible scars from their combined service, had proved that warriors don't stop being warriors when they leave the battlefield or receive medical discharge papers. They just find new battles worth fighting and new people worth protecting. On Sunday mornings, Marcus sits in his usual corner booth with Kane resting beside him on the orthopedic mat, watching Eleanor laugh at something on her phone. Alive, safe, unafraid to testify, unafraid to exist in public spaces. Officer Hendricks often joins them during off-duty hours, now with confidence that effective backup is always present 3 booths away. Kane's ears swivel at every sound, tracking acoustic signatures with the vigilance that characterized German Shepherd's exceptional hearing capabilities. Marcus's eyes track every entrance, catalog every new patron, assess every interaction for potential threat indicators. Both of them remain ready for violence that will probably never come, but could arrive at any moment without warning. That's what left everyone who witnessed the incident or watched the footage in genuine awe. Not just that they intervened successfully, but that they were always ready to intervene. Quietly, professionally, without ego or hesitation or need for recognition. Just 2 damaged warriors who refused to accept that their fighting days were permanently over, sitting in a civilian diner where ordinary people eat pancakes, completely unaware that the most tactically dangerous individuals in the room are the quiet ones who limp, who favor old injuries, and who will absolutely respond with overwhelming professional violence when threats emerge against those who cannot defend themselves.